This segment of tonight's forum is for County Commissioner District 3. Gregg Wright and Paul Wilson are the candidates for this seat. Would you like me to review the rules? 1 minute each for opening statements, 1 minute each for answers. You get 3 chances to make rebuttals, 1 rebuttal per question, per person.
Rebuttals are 30 seconds.
And rebuttals are 30 seconds. 1 minute for closing statement. In the closing, Mr. Wilson will go first. All right, Mr. Wright has drawn the number 1 for making an opening statement, so we'll begin with Mr. Wright.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the people of District 3 for answering their door when I stopped to visit with them about county issues and to ask for their votes. I found them to be interested and thankful that I was concerned about their issues and that I took the time to visit with them. In many cases, I knocked on their door 3 times. I have done this because I believe that good government and people's faith in good government comes from good communication and personal contact. I'm asking them for their vote so that I can continue the tradition of person-to-person contact. Olmsted has great resources and great people. I look forward to the opportunity to help making Olmsted the first among Minnesota counties.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you and good evening. And it certainly is an honor to be here and to visit with all of you and to share the questions that you'll certainly send forward to us. My name is Paul Wilson, County Commissioner in District 3. I've had the honor of representing this area for 18 years, which I've gotten a considerable amount of gray hair, I suppose, since that time. But we continue to move on. It's been an honor to serve the people. I had one bit of advice when I was first elected, and I have not forgotten it. And it was probably the evening of the election. I was told by an elderly woman, always make sure whenever you're dealing with an issue to stop, look, and listen. So that's been my theme throughout my tenure, to take a critical, analytical look, to listen to what people are saying, and then come to a conclusion based on your best knowledge, your best intuition, and what you perhaps think the environment is out there. So it's on that basis that I've continued to move forward. I'll perhaps share a little bit later on more specific things, but we'll continue on now this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our first question from the League of Women Voters, we're going to begin with Mr. Wright. What are your priorities for funding county programs in the face of rising costs?
Well, the main issue that the county is charged with is to take care of the vulnerable people in the county. And so that has to be the primary issue, and everything else has to fall behind that. But in addition, if I would rank them, I would say that public health also has to be at least second among those issues, because caring for the county and making sure that the newborns and the well baby clinics are taken care of, and focusing on the children would really be very helpful to resolve problems in the future. And the roads probably would come in the last.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
I think one of the key things that the county has established over the last several years is a system, we call it a grid system, whereas we have all of our services, if you will, that are listed, and they are ranked by priority. For example, what puts us at greatest risk, what puts us at great liability perhaps. And so we would look at all of those concerns, and many of those do concern the human service arena. So it's very important as we look at these that we make sure we identify where they fall in the grid system and then move forward to potential funding. Now, if we feel that something rises to the occasion perhaps above what is mandated or what is specifically spelled out, that becomes a critical concern, and that's where we have to look at partnerships, innovations that are going on. In fact, we're doing many innovations in our human service arena with technology at this point that's being shared and utilized by other counties. So it's something that we kind of have pulled together. So maybe when we get to talking about cooperation, that's one of those things we can highlight. But we would certainly follow through on the grid system, but making sure it's in compliance and making sure we're doing what needs to be done.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Our next question will go to Mr. Wilson first. Are you a proponent of, and how would you propose to work with the MAGIC Act?
Well, actually, I've been very involved with it. I'm glad you brought that up, the MAGIC Act, because it's something I'm actually on a small work group at this time made up of 5 county commissioners from across Minnesota, also 5 key staff people from around Minnesota in county government. that is going to be looking at how we look at the next legislative session and get the Magic Act passed. What is the Magic Act? Minnesota Accountability, Government Innovation, and Cooperation. Essentially, it's a tool to be used. Now, especially as we look at what's coming with the potential state shortfall again, which is looking at what some are saying $1.5 to $2 billion. We are going to need tools to deal with it. This gives us that opportunity. It will not solve everything, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. It's something counties have come together across the state to work tirelessly for. We got it through the House with only one dissension 2 years ago. It did not make it, or excuse me, the Senate 2 years ago. I said that wrong. Went through the House last year. It got stalled out towards the end of session, basically due to a political party infighting. So.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Well, you know, I think the difficulty of the Magic Act is to plan on something that may not happen, right? For instance, we used to talk about regionalism, and that was going to solve a lot of problems, but regionalism really never took place. And so now you're putting your eggs in a basket here to say that the Magic Act might pass. Well, it might, and then of course we don't know what form it's going to be in as it actually passes. So I'm a big believer that you ought to have a plan B in place, and the plan B is going to be what happens if the Magic Act doesn't pass. And that puts us back into this situation that we're going to have to look at a great deal of collaboration and cooperation with other county or other levels of government in order to solve these problems that we're having with funding the issues for city, county, township, as well as school district.
If I could just add a comment on to that. Just keep in mind, as I mentioned, the Magic Act is one tool to be utilized, that there'll be other opportunities. If this should not pass, counties will come together. We have come together already initially looking at redesign. This is just a product of that as we move forward. So there's going to be other opportunities that will come forward. I'm very positive of that.
Thank you. Our third question will begin with Mr. Wilson. How can the county board work more effectively with other government agencies in the county?
Good question. One of the things I think that makes it difficult to work, and just by nature of cities, counties, and I hear this from my comrades from around the comrades, that's the right word or not, but from those working together in same positions around counties around the state, that it's very difficult to try to hold together cities and counties on cooperative efforts. And one of the big challenges is our missions are different. So oftentimes we see things differently, so it makes it somewhat harder. Does not mean that we should not be doing it. In fact, I would advocate that we should do more. However, one of our biggest arenas to move forward in is counties working together with counties, because we have like-minded missions. Going back to what our mission is, it's certainly far easier. We can get more done at the legislature that way. And moving forward, we can do things together with the city. In fact, we have done a number of things together with the city. Even, for example, looking at some of our diversity issues with the employees. We have a diversity committee that's made up of city and county folks working together. So there's a variety of things that we have done. We will continue to build on, but our mission statement has to be a driver in that.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Would you ask the question once more, please?
I will. How can the county board work more effectively with other government agencies
Right.
in the county?
Right. Well, you know, I think the big thing is communication. You can't work with anybody unless you start talking with somebody. And you can't talk with them unless they're in the same room. And that hasn't really been done very effectively in Olmsted County. I would establish a tri-government panel committee in which the county, the city, and the townships get together and start talking. And once you start talking, you're going to say, all right, let's figure out what our common ground is. Let's figure out what the common issues are. And once you can figure out what the common issues, you have a place to start talking about how you can resolve those issues. All right, and then there are things that maybe you don't find in common. You leave those for much later after you've established some working rapport with these other levels of government. And I think eventually the counties are going to have to start talking to the state, because the state is one of the major players in creating the funding problems that we have already.
Thank you.
If I could add a comment, so that's okay. This is my third. I better be spending my dollar here.
Yes, you're two down.
Two down. Okay, as of now, okay. The city and the county and the town, actually, small cities and townships have over many years been meeting. In fact, it used to be that they met on a regular basis. There was a tri-government organization. As time went on, the townships, I believe, were thought to brought into it. The problem and the reality was it made it too cumbersome with too large of a group of people. So it was kind of broken down over a period of time. We do make every attempt to meet twice a year. For example, the city of Rochester, we've met with the small cities at their request. So we've done those things we can build on and do more, no question.
Thank you. Our next question will be first offered to Mr. Wright and will come from the Post Bulletin.
What do you think of the way the county board has managed the budget and the county's property tax levies?
Well, that's one of the primary reasons why I got involved in this race in the first place. And that I think that it's been far too easy to say, well, you know, we really can't deal with the state and they dealt us a bad hand, and so the only thing that we can do is raise property taxes. And my good friend here, Mr. Wilson, has raised your property taxes at 25% over the past few years. And as I have been door knocking and talking to people, they will tell me very quickly, look, this is my fixed income. Right here, this is my fixed income. If my property taxes go up like this every year, I can live in my house 3 more years, 4 more years, maybe 10 more years. And they got this figured out. Anybody that's over 70 years old can figure this out right away. And that's where I think it was really bad, because if we don't manage that, then we force people out of their homes. And some people may have already been forced out of their homes, which of course means that you have to raise the property taxes again. My good friend here has a history of doing that, and I think that we have to have some very good ways of looking at this without raising property taxes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Well, I think the county has done a very good job of managing its financial resources and or the budgets. We have maintained our AAA bond rating over very difficult years. We are perhaps one of the few in the nation that has been able to do that at the county level. In addition, I would also say, as many of you may recall, last year we adopted a 0% levy increase budget. Now, that does not necessarily mean a 0%, obviously, for an individual property owner, but in the grand scheme of things, this year we adopted a maximum for next year of 2.75. Generally speaking, they have been in that range, perhaps 3% in some years in the past for the overall levy. Those are the particular numbers that we are dealing with at this time. We have been good stewards of the public dollar, of the public trust. I've heard this numerous times that the county does a good job financially. I think we've been recognized nationally for that. So.
Thank you.
Have a rebuttal, please. Yeah. I discussed with Tom Wolney, who works on the taxes for the county, and I looked at a median household cost. And the median household cost, even though you have all those wonderful facts and figures, those people know that their taxes went up 25% over the past few years. And as yet, the county, over all your 18 years of experience, hasn't figured out what you're going to do in order to stop that and stop forcing people out of their homes.
Can I rebut the rebuttal?
You may. This is your third rebuttal.
No, I'll go for it. I think we've been very good stewards of the public dollar. I think if you look at figures beyond what have been mentioned here, and I can't get into individual, assessments and that type of thing, that would be inappropriate for me to do that. However, looking at where we have been, what we have done, and what we have accomplished with the dollar, I think we've done a very good job of it. I think we've been recognized for that, and I can only re-emphasize that. And we'll continue to move forward in a very prudent fashion as we have done in the past.
Thank you. Our next question will go first to Mr. Wilson, and it comes from the Post Bulletin.
How should the county adequately prepare for our aging population?
Good question. I've been very involved with aging issues through the National Association of Counties, and initiating in our county right now we have a Vital Aging Commission. I am recommending to the county board, we unfortunately had to cut the support for that a couple of years ago. I think because it has come to the fore in so many areas, and I'm glad you bring it up, it's something we need to revisit again. And in fact, I've talked with City of Rochester folks, perhaps informally, to see if there's something they would jointly like to maybe work together on. It's one of those things that I think we could work together on, because it has a significant impact to our communities. The Vital Aging Commission could be the sounding board, it could be the policy initiation, whatever we would want to design it to be. It would have to be restructured from its current standing, but that certainly is something that's doable. But I think that's something that would help us in a great deal to begin to deal, well, with this issue. We had a summit about 6-7 years ago that brought together all the community stakeholders on this issue. So that's where we move forward, and we can move forward beyond that.
Mr. Wright?
Would you repeat the question again? Thank you.
Sure. How should the county adequately prepare for our aging population?
Well, one of the things that the county has to do is the issue that we just got done talking about. They have to prepare by planning to collaborate and cooperate with other county agencies, because if you don't resolve the property tax issue, the county will be taking care of all the old people. And there is simply not enough money to do that. That has to be resolved. But in addition to that, I do think that we have a great senior citizen population, and certainly without going to statewide committees or other counties' committees, we have people right here in Olmsted County that can advise the county board on what the issues are and what they need. Transportation is obviously one of those issues, because as people age, they have a less ability to drive. The signage is going to have bigger letters on them. The white stripes on the road are going to have to be wider. All those things are going to have to be done to assist those people to get to their appointments, to get to the grocery stores, and to get back home. And in addition to that, I think the public health is going to have to be involved, because public health has not necessarily dealt with the geriatric issues as much in the past as they're going to have to be in the future. So those are the things that we need to plan for.
Thank you. Our next question from the Post Bulletin will begin with Mr. Wright.
What do you think is the most pressing issue within your district, and how should the county board address that issue?
Well, the most pressing issue is that the 25% property tax increase that Mr. Wilson has voted for over the past few years. People will tell you that over and over. You heard that in the last forum, is that they continue to talk across the state that property taxes are a real issue. So the ways that we're going to deal with that is we're going to look at collaboration and cooperation with other levels of government. And the city, the townships, as well as the school districts in the county are going to have to put their heads together to figure out where the overlaps are, stop the overlaps, divide those things up, make efficiencies where we can make efficiencies. And in the final run, what we're going to have to do is that the counties, all 87 of them, are going to have to get together, not hire a lobbyist and send a lobbyist to the state legislature, but they're going to have to get together, all together, and go to the state legislature and say, you created this problem and you're going to have to resolve it. Now, the county at this point has not been effective in doing that, but I think that I can add that effectiveness.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Well, I certainly would raise issue with the fact that all 87 counties have not moved forward. In fact, we have. In fact, it was under my leadership as president of the Association of Minnesota Counties that all 87 counties voted to move forward in dealing with the issues, certainly in the human service arena, because that's one that is very significant to us in terms of dollars, but looking at redesign and how that's going to play out. It was a very difficult task to get 87 counties, and if you think of what the makeup is from very agrarian, very rural, to very suburban, very urban. It was certainly a very unique challenge, but I have to applaud those counties in the state of Minnesota, for moving forward. And we have addressed the two administrations that have been in power in St. Paul, have invited us periodically to come forward and share what those concerns and issues are, so they can begin the process of looking what can they do. The challenge, of course, is the legislative body. But as I mentioned before, we got the Magic Act through one body with one vote opposing, and we are working on the other one, and we'll continue to build on other opportunities. The doors are wide open, and we're going to move forward.
Thank you. First question from the audience. We'll begin with Mr. Wright. What do you see as the most important issue facing Olmsted County?
Well, need I say this again? Mr. Wilson has raised your taxes, county taxes, 25%, your property taxes. That is a real problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem. And until they get that done, people are going to continue to talk about that. Mr. Wilson talks about the effectiveness of getting 87 counties, and he was the chairman of that. But you know, in my business, I don't go by what students tell me or my teenager tells me. I say, well, what's the end result? Did you get it done? Have you learned? Has something changed? And you can talk all you want about it and say that we got everybody together, but the fact is that unless you have an effective change, you haven't done the job.
Mr. Wilson?
This is going to be a rebuttal, but it needs to be sharply said. The counties were very effective in getting the short-term offender issue addressed. That was those individuals who were being held in our jails. We eventually got that taken care of as a financial issue that was a burden on the counties. And the counties pulling together accomplished that. So yes, there's a track record already in place. Also looking at technology issues, counties across the state of Minnesota, if you will, in some cases are skipping a county with the use of technology. No longer do the borders have to be contiguous to look at doing a joint effort. They're doing these kinds of things and addressing those low issues that perhaps in the past would have prohibited them from doing that. So I think they've been very successful at moving forward, looking at some of the other legislation that we've been able to pass and things that counties working together. Everything from smoke-free legislation to dealing with meth labs, various things that have been done across the state by the work of counties, moving state agencies and state legislators forward. It's going to be an ongoing cultural change, but it's one that's going to happen, and it is happening as we speak.
Thank you. Question from the audience. How can private and public partnerships as well as private charities complement the services that need to be provided by the county? And we'll begin with Mr. Wilson.
Well, I think many of the nonprofits that originally were established, certainly in our county, were established for the purpose of helping counties deliver services, whereas we would not, for example, be hiring necessarily staff people, but we'd have those opportunities to reach out to the community, the nonprofit and the private sector. Another factor that has to play into this too is whether or not you want to go to the concept of outsourcing. We have looked at sometimes using other sources to carry out our mission. The bottom line is it has to carry out our mission and it has to do it economically. And we have to be very careful when we enter those kinds of things because our obligation is there, our liability is there, and it's also to take care of the folks that need to be taken care of, whether they're elderly, whether they're young children and in special needs, or various other makeup of our community. So it's very important that we look at that. I think we will continue to do that, but the bottom line, sometimes we've even found it's cheaper to do it ourselves or less expensive to do it ourselves and maintain the mission. So we have to do a balance of both.
Mr. Wright?
I think that the charities and the nonprofits can contribute a great deal to the quality of life in the county. And some of those areas are in homelessness. There's been very effective charities that are involved in homelessness, in which it's a growing concern in the county. And we need to invite more of those charities and nonprofits who have ideas about how to deal with homelessness into the county and have them participate. Mental health services is another one where we're using nonprofits and privates in cooperation in dealing with some of the issues that the county can't deal with all by itself. So I think there are many opportunities for that and probably more opportunities in the future. My guess is we're dealing with the older population. We'll find nonprofits and charities coming in to help us a great deal with dealing with the geriatric issues that we'll soon be facing.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Mr. Wilson. What would you suggest as 3 items for the agenda of the next meeting of the city, county, and township officials?
Well, certainly one of the things we would want to have in that agenda is, and depending on timing, would be perhaps what in the next legislative session might be something that we could work on together. Are there like-minded things? Is there some opportunity there? Also looking at, I think it's essential that we look at our employee bases, in other words, to see if there's some opportunities there. In the past, we have, for example, left open the personnel director position in the possibility that there could be a joint city-county personnel individual, which was something that, the county, I think for about 1.5 to 2 years, we left that position open with the possibility, or at least hoping to get discussion. Unfortunately, that never happened, but continue to move forward in those things. Other arenas will be looking at the economic growth of this community. By community, I mean not just Rochester, but the whole region. when we look at the opportunity that abides us now with the possibility of a sales tax extension, it's going to be one of the things that will help not just the city of Rochester, Olmsted County, but all of our partner communities around us, many of them small communities that would benefit from this. What it's saying is that what's good for you is good for us and vice versa, and I think it's very important.
Well, I think the agenda ought to say, the first one say, how are we going to establish the tri-county level meetings? And because communication has got to be established. We were never going to get to collaboration and cooperation until we start to have tri-county meetings and establish that communication process. The next one would be that we would establish meetings between the county administrator and the city administrator. I think that for as long as this has occurred, that the county administrator and the city administrator has never met with each other, don't talk to each other on a regular basis, on a formal basis. It shows you that we're not going to have cooperation and collaboration until that starts. And the third thing that ought to be on the agenda is how we can deal with collaboration and cooperation with dealing with our children and our youth, because that's where we ought to put a lot of emphasis in order to break the cycle of people that might need county assistance, is to make sure that those youth and those kids get the services that they need.
Thank you. We're talking about keeping taxes in line, if not putting taxes down. How do you propose that we deal with unfunded mandates from the state? We'll begin with Mr. Wright.
Well, you know, the unfunded mandates, I think, really give the county the high ground. They give the high ground because, first of all, the county is the agency that deals with human services, and when those services are really needed, and they were passed for good reasons because they have to be there, it allows us the high ground to take to the legislature and to the people to say, you know, it's the state legislature that is really causing part of this problem. They need to bring along money along with those mandates. If we fall into the category of the Magic Act, that really relieves the state of its burden to say, well, now you can just pick and choose among all these things that you really don't have to do, or you can decide not to do them. And really that makes losers out of a lot of people in the county that need services, because somebody isn't going to get it. And I think that that's the danger. So I kind of like to have the mandates because they're there for a purpose. And I really think that we ought to be able to fight for those funding in order to provide those services.
Well, it's very true that the mandates were established basically for a purpose. And of course, the purpose was probably very noble, and in many cases it probably is very essential today. The challenge is that, of course, first of all, you do have groups that support those who become very forceful, and certainly with legislators. If you talk to legislators, they will tell you over the years. In fact, I can tell you quite frankly, the Association of Minnesota Counties, working together as all 87 counties, forwarded, if you will, approximately 6 to 7 years ago, a significant list of mandates that were asked for by the legislators to what we thought should be repealed, or at least sunsetted, or at least tagged so they could analyze them closer. We did that. It went nowhere with the legislators, and their constant response was, there are too many people, too many advocates for this particular position or this particular position. So it makes it extremely difficult and very challenging to address the issue in that fashion. However, we did that, we've tried that, and we'll continue to move forward to look at other opportunities. But there's no question that the funding becomes a challenge when we're expected to carry it out, because we also carry with it the liability if it's not done.
Thank you. I think probably our last question for the evening, for these two gentlemen. What measures would you support to protect the environment in the county? And we'll begin with Mr. Wilson.
Well, I think, one of my personal concerns always has been in my tenure is the issue of karst geography. And I know how delicate of a balance that is in our region. Sometimes I've gotten to the ire of those whom thought I was too extreme in analyzing and making sure we protected that. But I will continue to do that. We've not had a number of those issues in very recent years, although the issue of frac mining certainly is raising its head, if you will. And that is something that I think is very concerning to me as we look at this issue. The county board has taken an initial step, if you will, to look at the transportation impact on what that would mean to our roads, and I think that certainly was a very responsible step to take. But I want to make it very clear, the issue of karst geography is very important to me. It's something that will be a key standard as we move forward, should that this debate on this issue or any other continue to go forward. So,
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Well, if you're talking about the sand mining issue, as I think the county ought to take a very go slow approach on this. This is one thing that we can learn from other people. If you've ever built a house, you've probably gone out and looked at a lot of other people's houses to see how they've done it and what they did right and what they did wrong before you went and build your own house. So I think that there are other people that are going to enter into the mining that we can learn a great deal from. And once the environment is damaged, it's very difficult to put it back together again. So there's no need to rush into this. The sand will always be there. You can always do it later. And sometimes I think in this case it's better to do it later rather than sooner. So I really think that it's a go slow approach and make sure that the environment stays intact before you put that shovel into the sand.
Thank you. That concludes the questions portion of our forum. We will now hear closing statements from each candidate. Candidates, you'll have 1 minute to speak, and Mr. Wilson will go first.
well, thank you. That time certainly went fast. I didn't think it was that long. I have certainly been a resident of this area since 1972. I've been in the floral business or related to the floral business all my life. So I grew up, if you will, in the 1960s. So I think we'll call this the epitome of flower power. That's what I've heard. So I still get a little mileage on that every now and then. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the participation. I think I've been a very effective commissioner serving District 3 and certainly working with all of our counties across Minnesota. Another one I wanted to throw in there was the fact that it was due to the counties coming together, working with their federal elected officials, that achieved securing the targeted case management dollars that would have disappeared from Minnesota, about $167 million a few years ago, that has been critical to part of our social service funding. So it's been something that's very strong for us working together. We also have worked together through NACO to establish a prescription drug card. If you don't have one is available to you from the county. There is no eligibility. Anybody is available for it. The county residents have saved almost $500,000 since inception a few years ago. So it's something I invite you to. Thank you.
Mr. Wright.
Thank you very much. As you are well aware, one of my biggest concerns is about rising property taxes. There are 30 million near poor people in the United States, of which Olmsted has its share. Raising property taxes takes houses away from people and makes them dependent on the county, which makes no sense because, of course, we're here to keep people independent and make sure that they don't become dependent on the county. Mr. Wilson has a history of raising those taxes, and in fact, over the past few years has raised those property taxes 25%. I believe that we can fund the county budget and continue to deliver effective services without raising property taxes. I have proposed that collaboration and cooperation with other levels of government can result in greater fiscal responsibility. I also believe that fiscal responsibility starts at the top. Mr. Wilson, while asking others to make sacrifices, has raised his own salary 77%. And in 1 year, it was $5,000 alone. I believe that the correct course of action is for leaders to make sacrifices along with everyone else. Mr. Wilson has used over $22,000 of taxpayer money to travel around the country. I believe that we need boots on the ground, and that's what I will be doing.
I should be allowed to correct that, if you don't mind.
20 seconds left.
Probably it comes to about $3,000 a year that I would have spent. And I would say that since my activity is probably a little higher than $22,000, but I'm going to be very honest with you. The public has gotten a good return on the dollar when we look at the things that I certainly have worked with, which the county board, by the way, unanimously has supported in doing these activities. As I mentioned, the targeted case management to counties coming together, working with the federal government. We've been acknowledged for that. It's a significant amount of money that we have saved taxpayers.
Thank you, candidates.
So I would like to rebut that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got one left. Yep.
I didn't mean to imply that it wasn't legal. I just meant to imply that I think that the people of the county deserve boots on the ground and people working here at home, not gallivanting around the country on county money.
There's
And
no
I
way
think
you're
that
gonna be
they-
working with
that's the
individuals
issues.
unless you're working with them. You need to be there.
All right, so how many more rebuttals do we get
You
here?
only get one per issue.
It's probably all right.
That's it. So we're gonna have to draw this to a close tonight. Hold on just a second. Before we begin the next segment of our forum, we'll take a short break. We'll begin promptly at 8:30. Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.